Welcome to the Love Lab Podcast, the place to be for honest and real talk about relationships and sex. Whether you're a man or woman, single or a couple, this is the show for you. I am your host, Kevin Anthony, and I am here to help you have the relationship of your dreams and the best sex of your life. All right, welcome back to the Love Lab Podcast. This is episode 367, and it is titled Moving Beyond Sexual Shame and Reclaiming Your Sexual Power. So I've done a few shows on different, sort of subtopics around shame. For instance, I did a show, I had a couple on, and I believe the title of that episode was What the Church Doesn't Want You to Know or something like that. And that couple specialized in helping people get over sexual shame that comes from being in a particular religion. I also had a woman on named Tilly not too long ago, who I sometimes work together with. And we talked about how women specifically could deal with sexual shame. However, I haven't done, at least in a really long time, one of the very early shows that Celine and I did was on sexual shame. But that was a long time ago, and I have a lot more to share about it these days, because that was many years ago. So I haven't really done a full episode on the idea of what is sexual shame and how can we move past it. So that's what I'm going to do on today's show. We are going to cover, obviously, what is sexual shame? Where does it come from? How does it manifest? Like what signs are there that show that this is, whatever issue you're having relates to sexual shame? Is there a difference between men and women when it comes to sexual shame? And then, of course, how do we get rid of it? And then how does working to get rid of this help us reclaim our sexual power? So those are things that we are going to cover in today's show. As always, the topics for these shows are usually things that are present in my practice, in the work that I do, sometimes in my friend's life or even my own life. And I've been working with a client lately where a big part of what we're working on is removing sexual shame. Now that comes up a lot with a lot of clients, but what made me, think about doing this episode is just how much this sexual shame was affecting this particular individual. And so I thought, you know what? Let's do a show on that. Let's just really get it all out there, because I know a lot of people deal with sexual shame. So that's what we're going to do on today's show. Of course, I have a few ads. First, ladies, did you know that the overwhelming majority of men consider receiving oral sex a must in their relationship? Of course you did, because men have been asking you for it your whole life. But do you feel confident in your ability to give great oral sex? If you tend to avoid it because you don't feel like you are good at it, or if you feel that you are pretty good at it but want to get even better, then my new Blowjob Mastery course is for you. I have teamed up with the amazing coach Ree Duong of Eternal Love to bring you a practical and easy to follow course that is guaranteed to increase your confidence and skill when giving oral sex to your man. In this course, you will get all the secrets to mastering the art of oral sex with step-by-step instructions and multiple live demos. Go to sacredfemininearts.com/BJ Mastery. That's sacredfemininearts.com/BJ Mastery. That link is in the description below. I have had really amazing feedback on this course so far, and I'm really, really happy that this is helping people. It is really helping them, get over, believe it or not, some shame around giving oral sex. Some insecurity around that. It's helping couples grow closer together. It's enhancing their sex life. So it's just amazing and wonderful, and I'm really grateful for that. And of course, Power and Mastery. You've been hearing me do ads for this for a long time on this show. Power and Mastery 3.0 is the latest version of the popular men's sexual mastery course. If you're struggling with erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, or simply want to increase your skills in the bedroom, then Power and Mastery is for you. Join the exclusive club of men who have taken their sexual performance into their own hands and become sexual masters. Mastering your sexuality is a key component to becoming the man she has always dreamt of and craves. Don't leave your sexual performance up to chance or the throw of the dice. Become a sexual master today by going to powerandmastery.com/sexual-mastery and joining the exclusive club of men who have taken their destiny into their own hands. That's powerandmastery.com/sexual-mastery. That link is also in the description. I know it's a lot of ads up front, but I got one more fun thing that I want to share with you all. I've had a woman on the show named Belle DiLorenzo twice now. She's an amazing young woman who's created an awesome course on pompoir for women. That is at the same link that you can find the next thing that I'm going to show you. But during one of our discussions, she uttered the phrase, "more orgasms, less wars." And I said, that is awesome. I'm going to make a t-shirt about that. And so I finally did. I finally made some t-shirts. Check this out. Here's the men's version right here, right? More orgasms, less wars in navy and gold. My brand colors, which I personally love. And then, of course, we've got one for the ladies, too, in pink and white. So, wear it proudly. More orgasms, less wars. You can find those at kevinanthonycoaching.com/products. They'll be right on the top of the page. And yeah, it's just kind of a fun thing. I don't expect it to be a big moneymaker. I just love the phrase. I thought it was cool. It's a good message, and I just thought it would be fun. So if that is appealing to you, please go check that out. Okay, let's get into the content for today's show. Let's start with defining what is sexual shame, because we have to understand what we're talking about, and it will make more sense when we get into where does it come from, how does it manifest, and how do we fix it if we understand exactly what we're talking about. Sexual shame is defined as feeling wrong, bad, or inadequate about one's sexual acts, feelings, or desires, and is not an inherent trait, but rather a learned emotional response stemming from negative messages, judgments, or insufficient education about sexuality. It encompasses feelings of guilt, discomfort, and a sense that one's sexual being is fundamentally flawed. That is an excellent description of what sexual shame is. And that's why, I try not to read too much stuff to you guys. And obviously I was reading that if you're listening on the podcast, platforms. But it was just such a good definition of what sexual shame is. And there was a part of that I really wanted to point out. And it says it's not an inherent trait, but rather a learned emotional response. And that is really important for people to understand, because sometimes people think, well, that's just how I am, or that's just how I feel about it, or, there's no way I can get over it because it's just, how I am. And that is not true. And it clearly points that out right here in this definition. It is not an inherent trait, but rather a learned emotional response. Well, if you can learn an emotional response, you can unlearn an emotional response, and you can learn a new emotional response. So I got a little bit more on this. Experts say that sexual shame is a learned emotion, differentiating it from guilt by its focus. Guilt suggests a behavior is bad, while shame suggests I am a bad person. Big distinction there. Right? It's not just that the behavior is bad. When you're feeling shame around your sexuality, you're feeling like you are potentially a bad person for liking what you like, wanting what you want. This internalized message can cause individuals to believe that sex, their bodies, and their sexual organs are inherently wrong. Sexual shame can isolate individuals, leading to a desire to hide and disconnect from others, and is particularly powerful because sexuality is deeply intertwined with one's identity. Let me just say right now from the start that sex, your body, and your sexual organs are absolutely not inherently wrong. In fact, they're inherently right. And part of reclaiming not only your sexual power, but your power as a human and individual is to understand that and reclaim your sexual power. You know, years ago when Selena and I first got together and we decided it was time to bring our work together into one, we sat down and we wrote a mission statement about what that work was. Like, what was it that we were trying to accomplish by working together? And, you know, without going through the exact whole mission statement, one of the things that was written in there was this idea of bringing true sexual empowerment to people. Because you can't really be free if your sexuality is, you know, repressed, suppressed, hidden, shamed, right? And I talk a lot on this show about the idea that there really is only one energy that moves through us. We call it sexual energy, life force energy, universal energy, chi, jing, prana, whatever term you want to call it. We have but one life force energy. And sex is one way, one very powerful way, one very natural way to cultivate and move that energy and use it in this world. So when we have shame around our sexuality, we are stifling that flow of energy. We are limiting what it is that we can create and do in this world. And so we wanted to do our best to try to help people free up that and feel truly empowered with their sexuality. And so removing shame is a big piece of that. So that is what sexual shame is. And I think that is a very clear explanation. You know, if you're listening to this and you're still unsure, then, you know, drop something in the comments and say, I'm not sure I really understand. But I think that does a pretty good job of explaining it. Okay, now that we know what it is, it's important to know where it comes from. And this is true of anything. I work with a lot of clients. And yes, I am a sex and relationship coach. But as I say all the time, your sex and your relationship are not separate from the rest of your life. And many of the challenges that people deal with on a regular basis when it comes to their sexuality and or their relationships stem from things that don't have anything to do with sexuality or their relationships. Their childhood traumas, their, you know, traumas from, you know, parental upbringing, or, you know, could even be schooling, could be society stuff, it could be past relationship stuff as well. But there's a ton of stuff there. And so the key to really solving their issues is often to get to the root of what's causing it. If somebody has a trauma that's unrelated to sex, but it's manifesting as some sort of sexual dysfunction, we can teach the person all the skills and tools to have better sex. But if we don't heal the underlying condition, we're not likely to really solve the problem. So, same with sexual shame. We need to understand where it comes from. So let's start with, I have a list of 5 things here. Number 1, negative social stigmas. And by the way, these aren't in any particular order. But the first one on the list is negative social stigmas. We get a lot of our ideas about, you know, what is right and what is wrong when it comes to sex from our society and our social interactions. The problem is that by and large, society as a whole does not have a healthy relationship with sexuality, which is what I've been trying to shift. For all these years, I've been doing this work. And because of that, we don't get really good messages about sexuality from, society. Society has a lot of hangups, a lot of issues, and they try to force that on everybody else. And if you are not following along with, societal's norms, somehow you're wrong, or you're bad, or you're weird, or you're kinky, or you're whatever, label they want to throw on you. Next on the list, which is very similar but yet different, and that's cultural expectations. So number one was negative social stigmas, which society will say this particular act is bad and you shouldn't do it, right? But cultural expectations may say something like, well, this is how you should be doing it. This is what we expect of you when it comes to sex. We expect you to do it this way and this way and this way, and we expect you to follow this rule and this rule and this rule, right? The thing about negative social stigmas and cultural expectations is they change. They change over time, and they are, by and large, arbitrary. In other words, different cultures throughout different time periods in different parts of the world have all had different social stigmas and different cultural expectations. When you understand that, you realize that some of the beliefs you may have aren't really yours. They were just given to you by your cultural expectations and your negative social stigmas. Once you understand that, you can then begin the inquiry of, is this really true for me? Do I really believe what I've been told? And we'll talk more about that as the show goes on. Next on the list, historical or religious opposition to certain sexual acts. I have talked about this a lot on the show. I did a whole show on, religion and sexuality. Are they mutually exclusive? Go check that one out, because that, I think, was eye-opening for a lot of people. I dove into the major religions and exactly what it is they say about sex. And you would be surprised. A lot of what you've been told your religion says about sex, it doesn't actually say in your religion. So where did it come from? That is something I explore in that episode. So go check that one out. I also did an episode recently on anal sex, and I talked about how religions, the different major world religions, view that. So go check that out as well. That was a recent one that just came out. So, historical and religious opposition to certain sex acts is another place that this shame comes from. We have parental/religious teachings. So, your parents might say, oh, this is wrong, or you shouldn't do that. But remember, your parents got their ideas from the negative social stigmas, the cultural expectations, the historical and or religious opposition. And one of the things I say to my clients all the time, because often we are going back into their childhood and figuring out what patterns are there and where they came from and how to move past them. And one of the things I tell my clients all the time is, your parents couldn't have taught you what they themselves didn't know. So if they never embarked on a journey to remove their own sexual shame, then they couldn't possibly have helped you with that. In fact, most likely what they did was impart their own sexual shame onto you, because they never learned to deal with it themselves. And, I'm not saying you should be angry at your parents. They were working with what they had. Like I said, they couldn't teach you what they didn't know. And a lot of times they don't even know what they don't know. So a big part of moving past our childhood traumas is understanding that our parents were imperfect, that they had a lot of their own problems, their own challenges, their own traumas to deal with. As children, we tend to see them as these gods who know everything and can do everything. And the reality is they were just broke, unhealed people themselves. And they did their best, but, they, like I said, they couldn't teach you what they didn't know. All right, and next on the list is inadequate sexual education. Especially in certain parts of the world, including the West. Right here, the sexual education is pretty piss poor, in my opinion. Another thing that I have been trying very hard over the years to right. The fact that there's just such bad information out there, and bad information from quote unquote credible sources when it comes to sexuality. So that is kind of that is a list of the main places that I believe sexual shame comes from. I'm sure you can come up with others. It's not meant to be an exclusive list, but that covers pretty much all the main ones that most people would have. Obviously there can be trauma from, abuse or things like that. That's a possibility as well, and you could have shame around that. But those are kind of the main ones where most people can track their shame back to one of those. Okay. Like I said, important to understand where it comes from. So hold on to that thought, because we're going to come back to that in a little bit. Next, I want to talk about, how does sexual shame manifest? How do you know if there are some shame patterns operating underneath the surface that are negatively affecting your sex life? I mean, sometimes it's obvious. Like, you actually feel the shame. Like, you're like, I feel ashamed about the fact that I like X. But it's not always that simple and easy. So I have another list, because I love lists. I have another list of ways in which sexual shame can manifest. Number one, feelings of guilt. So you partake in a certain sexual act, or you even think about it, you want it, you desire it, and you feel guilty. I shouldn't want that. I shouldn't desire that. Somehow that's wrong, or whatever. So that's one way. That's a pretty obvious way if you're having those feelings about stuff. Another is lack of sexual confidence. So when you tend to feel shame around your sexuality, it will show up as a lack of confidence. In other words, you're afraid to ask for what you want. You're afraid to take action and do the things that you want. It gets maybe seen as hesitancy or lack of confidence, that sort of thing. So that's another way. Decreased libido is another one. And this is one that is maybe less obvious. In other words, you might be aware that you have a decreased libido, but you might not be aware of why you have a decreased libido. So you might be thinking it's a whole bunch of other things. And what could be happening is a program of sexual shame running underneath the surface that you may or may not be aware of, that's causing a decrease in libido. Next is inability to climax. So, an excess of sexual shame can get in the way and prevent you from being able to orgasm. Erectile dysfunction, that's another one. Sexual shame can come in and prevent you from being able to achieve an erection. Self-loathing / hatred is another way that it shows up. This is a bit more of an extreme form, but this is where maybe somebody has a sexual fetish that they somehow think like they're the only one in the world that has it, and that there's something really wrong with them for having it. And so they start to kind of self-loathe and sort of hate themselves for being that way. And one thing we'll talk about as we get on a little further in the show is that, doing this for a living, being a sex and relationship coach, I talk to a lot of people about sex, whether it's, through my work, whether it's through this show, whether it's through coaching, it's doing research all the time. talking whenever I go out in public and people find out what I do. I talk to a lot of people about sex, and I can honestly tell you that for most people, whatever your thing is, whatever your kink is or thing that you think is weird that you like, there are lots of other people out there who like the same thing. So many people think that they're the weird one and the only one, and it's just not true. And we'll talk more about that later. Next on the list, repressed sexual expression, meaning that you're holding yourself back in the bedroom, maybe not asking for the things you want, maybe not fully enjoying sex as much as you could or you want to. And then lastly on the list is sexual deviance. This is an interesting one because it has to do with the idea of sexual repression. If there's a lot of shame around sex and you tend to repress your sexual energy, we know that anything that we try to repress and suppress eventually has to find an outlet. And if we repress it for too long and too deeply, it can explode out in ways that aren't particularly healthy. So, it's just like, in any pressurized system, if the pressure gets to be too high, a pipe will explode somewhere, right? And it'll be a problem. Whereas, let's say you had a pressure relief valve where you could let out appropriate amounts of pressure in the system at appropriate times, you wouldn't have that. So I think that when people have a lot of shame around their sexuality and they suppress, it can, manifest in ways, I use the term sexual deviance, but, it could be excessive porn or maybe porn of a certain nature that we would say is probably not a healthy expression of sexuality. It could, manifest in, when you do have sex with people, doing it in a way that is not healthy and beneficial for all parties involved. Like there are ways in which it could come out negatively if it is suppressed too much. So those are some ways in which sexual shame can manifest. And if you're experiencing some of those things, maybe that aren't as obvious, like decreased libido, erectile dysfunction, inability to climax, repressed sexual expression, it's worth asking yourself, is there something there beneath the surface that maybe I haven't been aware of, that I feel shame about around my sexuality that's potentially causing my issue? I'm not saying that every erectile dysfunction or every inability to climax or every decreased libido is because of that. I'm just saying that sometimes those things are caused by that, and it's worth asking the question. Okay, one more thing before we take another break, and that is, I was curious when I was writing this episode as to whether or not sexual shame really differed between men and women. So, obviously, one way it could differ is one experiences it more than the other. But I wasn't really just content on knowing that. I wanted to know whether or not they actually experienced it differently. Did they have different types of feelings about it, or did it affect their sexual behavior in different ways? And so I took a little time to research that. And from what I found, there's really only one main way that sexual shame affects men and women differently. And that is that women tend to experience it more due to societal teaching that their sexuality should be hidden and or repressed. So in other words, men and women don't tend to really experience it differently, right? So, women can still have an inability to climax. They can have a lack of sexual confidence. They can have feelings of guilt, decreased libido. They could have self-loathing, repressed sexual expression. They can have all of that stuff, obviously, except for erectile dysfunction, just as much as men can. The difference is that because of the societal things that we talked about earlier, women tend to feel sexual shame more often. Well, that seems pretty obvious, right? Like, if a young man, brags about his sexual conquests, I've slept with 100 women, people are like, you go, man, you're a stud, yeah. But if a woman were to say, I've had sex with 100 men, oh my God, that's horrible, that's terrible, what a slut, right? Like, the stuff like that still exists, believe it or not. So because of that, women tend to feel more shame because they're told that they shouldn't want sex as much, they shouldn't enjoy it as much, they shouldn't have it as much, certain acts they shouldn't do, all that kind of stuff. So, I'm happy to find that there aren't major differences other than that. And I'm sad that, women have to experience that more. And hopefully, through educational podcasts like this, we can change that. All right. So we've covered what sexual shame is. We've covered where it comes from. We've covered how it manifests. I even talked about how it differs in men and women. When we come back on the other side of the break, I want to talk about how do we get rid of it. That's where I want to spend the bulk of this show, is how do we get rid of it? And then, of course, a little bit on how this helps us reclaim our sexual power. All right. Today's show is brought to you by Beducated. And, I'm doing this show today on sexual shame. And I've also had an opportunity to spend some time on the Beducated platform. And I've seen a lot of the courses, and I've gone through some of them. And I thought, I know I've seen stuff in there helping people, sort of get over shame. So I just went into the search function and I typed in the word shame. Do you know in Beducated there are 41 results that come up? Everything from building self-esteem in the bedroom to destigmatizing anal play and more. So they have a lot of resources in there. And I wanted to share that personal experience with you because that's just one word. I just typed in shame because it related to today's show. But they have quite the library of courses. So Beducated is where toe curling pleasure meets expert-backed education. You can dive into 150 plus courses that will help you enjoy sex more, master new spicy techniques, and radiate confidence in the bedroom. Beducated was created by top experts and has a huge variety of courses to choose from, everything from self-pleasure to kink, all in one place. And like I said, everything from destigmatizing anal play to building self-esteem in the bedroom and a whole lot more. Courses include video tutorials, practical exercises, and reliable information. If you are in a relationship and want to enhance intimacy and spice up your sex life, then check out Beducated today by going to the link below in the description. The link is in there. Go check it out. It's kind of a long one. If I read it, you're not going to remember it anyway, but just go into the description and check that out. And when you do, make sure to use the code LOVELAB to get 50% off the yearly pass. There is a risk-free 14-day money-back guarantee, so there is nothing to lose. Sign up, get access, and see all of the content for yourself. Remember to use the code LOVELAB to get 50% off the yearly pass. And one more time, that link is in the description. Okay, so now let's get into how can you get rid of sexual shame. I got a long list here. Number one, acknowledging its presence. So I talked about earlier, asking yourself if you're experiencing some of those symptoms, asking yourself some deep questions, trying to get to, is there some sexual shame here? And step number one is you just got to acknowledge that there is shame there, that you do feel some shame around something to do with your sexuality. Number two, once you have, of course, acknowledged that, it's self-acceptance. So a lot of times when we realize that there's a problem, especially if we didn't know there was a problem, we like beat ourselves up for it. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I have this problem, and I can't believe I've let it go on for so long. That doesn't do us any good. You just have to say, okay, whoa, now I realize there's an issue, and I'm glad that I was able to figure it out now. And what can I do to fix it? So that idea of self-acceptance and improving self-esteem is really important. Next one on the list is removing yourself from negative influences. So let's say, you happen to be involved in, a particular religion or societal structure or something that is constantly telling you that this is bad and wrong. And, you feel like, what, it's not bad and wrong. You might want to remove yourself. And, I'll say this, within a particular given religion, not every part of that religion will feel the same way about the same things. In other words, let's just say you're a Christian. There are some Christian churches that have a more enlightened view around sexuality and some that have a not very enlightened view. So I'm not saying that you have to leave your religion if that's, where the source is coming from, but, seek out another church or one that has a healthier viewpoint on that. And like I said, I did an entire show on, sex and spirituality, and I can tell you that when it comes to the Christian religion, the Bible says hardly anything about sex. It's only got a couple of rules. Everything else comes from just man making up stuff. So, find one that doesn't make up a lot of stuff. But anyway, that's the idea of sort of removing yourself from the negative influences. Next one, I talked about this a little bit already also, and it's validation. The idea that you are not strange and that many others like what you like. And that is absolutely true. Now, there could, of course, be some really off-the-wall, strange things that you're into sexually. I've heard some really interesting things. As long as it is not harmful to you or to anyone else, it is probably okay. And there are most likely other people out there who like whatever the thing is that you like. If something's really off the wall, and it's not harmful to anybody, okay, great. Have fun with it. But I would also ask myself the question, why do I like that? What need does that meet for me? Because you may find out that the thing itself isn't at all what's important, and there's some other need that you're trying to meet through that thing. And by figuring that out, you could probably get that need met other ways, and then you wouldn't need the weird thing. But validation goes a long way in helping you release shame, because like I said, I can't tell you how many people think, I thought I was the only one. There's a lot of people on this planet. Trust me, you are not the only one. Next on the list, accurate sex education. So important. When people get good information on sexuality, so much of that shame goes away. And so much of that shame comes from basically just lack of information, lack of knowledge, right? And when there's a void, when there's a lack, other people will fill in that void with all kinds of bullshit. Right? So quality, accurate sex education goes a long way. And that is exactly what I try to do here on this show and in all of my work. I try to give everybody the best and most accurate sex education they can get, because I know that people who have good information around sex have a healthier relationship to their sexuality, which means their sex lives improve, their relationships improve, their family life improves, their work life improves, everything improves. The world is a better place when people have a healthy relationship to their sexuality. Next, fostering open communication. This one is also very important because you got to talk about sex. I say this on the show a lot, but one of the best pieces of feedback I get in regards to my work is that it is so easy for me to just talk openly about sex, and it gives other people permission to talk about sex also. The more that we can talk about it in open and healthy ways, in age-appropriate ways, I got to put that in there because I'm not saying we should be talking about sex all the time to everyone. In healthy, age-appropriate ways, the more we will remove shame, because the more people will realize, oh, I'm not the only one, or oh, that's not so strange, or oh, whatever. So fostering open communication is another way. This is something I do with couples a lot. I can't tell you how many times couples come to me with struggles in the bedroom, and then I ask them, well, have you talked about this? It's, oh, no, I can't bring that up to him, or no, I can't ask her for that. And it's just like, wow, so much of the struggle that you're having is because you don't communicate about sex. So if we can get you to communicate about sex, we can solve a lot of those problems. Next on the list is fostering a healthier relationship with one's sexuality. So what do I mean by that? Well, I mean seeing sexuality as an important part of your life, of what it means to be a healthy, highly functioning human, because it is. And I can tell you, in any society where sex is really suppressed, you got a whole lot of other problems in that society that are related to that suppression. So, if you can really work to have a healthy relationship with your sexuality and see it as an integral part of the whole human being, we've got body, mind, spirit, right? That sacred triad that you see represented throughout all of human history in a million different symbols. One being the Holy Trinity is like the biggest symbol of that, but the tree scale, or tri-scale, depending on what language you're speaking, is another classic representation of it, right? It's this idea of the balance of all of those. And healthy sexuality is part of that balance. So working to really have that healthy relationship with your sexuality is an important part of being a balanced whole. And so the more you do that, the more it helps you get rid of sexual shame. Next, actively working to unlearn internalized negative beliefs about sexuality. So this is undoing the programming that you've been giving. And of course, that starts with realizing that you got programming, that you were given a bunch of ideas around sexuality that weren't your own, that somebody else determined for you. This is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do. So really looking at that and going, okay, what things are real and what things are not? What things are healthy expressions of sexuality, regardless of whatever culture or system says, and what things are unhealthy, and rewriting those belief patterns. Which is actually the next one on the list, which is rewriting narratives. So what's yours versus what was given to you. I guess those are very, very similar. I probably could have combined those into one, right? Unlearning internalized negative beliefs. Okay, so you can get, I guess the reason why I kept it that way is because one is getting rid of the old beliefs and the other one is writing some new ones over top of it. So that's important to do. And then there are embodiment practices, things that can help you get in touch with your sexuality in healthy ways. So that could be a self-pleasure practice. Could be something like a jade egg practice if you're a woman. These are some things that Tilly talked about when I interviewed her on the show. She talked about embodiment practices. Working with clients in the past, I've suggested things like, working with trusted, high quality Tantra practitioners or even potentially BDSM practitioners, only very professional ones that come highly recommended that have impeccable boundaries, right? But those are ways that you could explore and experiment a little bit with your sexuality and what you like and what you don't like. in a way that is safe, right? You're in a safe environment. Now, of course, you can do this with your partner too. You don't have to seek out outside help, but just the idea of experimenting a little bit with some practices that are more embodied as opposed to just mental stuff. And that's the idea here. Like when we say embodied, we just mean like you're actually using your body and like physically doing something as opposed to just mentally thinking about it. Next is embracing sexuality as sacred. You really do need to see your sexuality as something that's sacred. Too many people see it as something that is, again, shameful or dirty or wrong or animalistic, and we should be more evolved than that, or, whatever dumb stuff I hear people say. Sexuality is sacred. That's one of the things that I always loved about Tantra, is that that's the way Tantra views sexuality. It is something sacred. It is something beautiful. It is something that can cultivate more beauty in the world. And, I think if you can start to see it like that, you'll actually release a lot of the shame you had around, what you thought sexuality was. Safe experimentation. I kind of talked about this one a little bit already also. And this is that idea of, in safe places with trusted people, experimenting with some things. Now, for some people, experimenting might just be, something really simple, like we did a different position, right? Or we used a toy or something. For others, it could be more, expanding into, like I said, Tantra, or some light BDSM stuff where you're working on trust stuff with power dynamics and things. I mean, just experimenting a little bit, figuring out what works for me, what doesn't work for me, what do I like, what do I not like, right? And starting to form your own ideas and opinions about sexuality and what works for you. And then, of course, seeking professional support. I gave you this list, right? Like acknowledging and self-acceptance and validation and accurate sex education and, fostering open communication, down the list, right? But I didn't actually tell you how to do each one of those things. I mean, that would be like, each one would be a show in and of itself, right? So if you're hearing this list and going, okay, cool, I know what I need to do, but I don't really know how to do it, that's where seeking professional support comes in. This is one of the things that I help people with. So if you know that you're dealing with sexual shame issues and you want to overcome them, then, check out my coaching programs. Go to kevinanthonycoaching.com. And, I've got /men, women, couples. Find whatever is right for you and get some help. Right? You can move through this stuff a lot faster if you've got some help. And then lastly on the list, patience, self-compassion. Remember, these patterns have been formed very early on. They are very deeply ingrained, and you've been living with them for a very long time. And therefore, it can sometimes take a while to get past them. It can take some time to move through them, to unlearn them, to write new patterns. So have patience. Don't expect it to all be solved right away. Don't think that 40 years of living with sexual shame is going to be gone in an afternoon. It could. It's actually possible. I've seen it happen. But it's unlikely. So give yourself some patience and have some self-compassion. Just keep doing the work little by little until you get to where you want to be. Okay. That really is the bulk of the show that I wanted to cover, but we've got a few minutes left, and I did want to just mention a little bit about how this helps you reclaim your sexual power. Because after all, that is part of the title of this episode. It's moving through sexual shame and reclaiming your sexual power. So, releasing sexual shame is truly liberating. It is liberating. It feels like a huge weight is off your back, or, as the expression goes, the monkey is off your back, right? It truly is liberating. And the more liberated that you feel, the more in your power you feel. And releasing sexual shame is crucial for reclaiming sexual power, as it allows individuals to cultivate a positive and healthy relationship with their own sexuality, fostering self-acceptance and authenticity. Look, if you can cultivate a positive and healthy relationship with your sexuality, create self-acceptance, be authentic in your sexual expression, then that is you being in your sexual power. It is. It allows you to take control of your sexual life force energy, right? So now you are the one controlling it rather than old patterns, shame, old belief patterns, running the show. Now you are running the show. You've taken control of it, which means you have reclaimed your power. And then lastly, you will see your confidence and power in other areas of your life improve also. When you are sexually confident, when you feel empowered, when you know who you are as a person and as a sexual being in this world, that way of being will just permeate every other area of your life. And you will definitely see other things improve as well. So those are some ways that releasing shame will help you reclaim your sexual power. And again, reclaiming your sexual power isn't just about sex. It's about reclaiming your personal power, your sovereignty in this world, which is just critically important. All right, well, there you go. That is my sort of deep dive into sexual shame, what it is, how it manifests, where it comes from, how it might differ in men and women, what we can do to get rid of it, and of course, how it can help us reclaim our sexual power. I hope that you found this interesting. I hope that you learned something. I hope that maybe you have been inspired to take control over your sexuality. And as always, if you need help, don't hesitate to reach out to me and get the help that you need. And ultimately, what I really want is everybody to be fully in their healthy, full sexuality, sexual expression and power, because I know they will be better off and the world will be better off. All right, everybody, that's all the time I have for this episode, and I'll see you next week. I hope you liked this episode of the Love Lab podcast. If you enjoy this show, subscribe, leave me a review, and share it with your friends. And for more free exclusive content, join me in the Passion Vault at kevinanthonycoaching.com/vault. That's kevinanthonycoaching.com/vault. Thanks for listening. And remember, as Celine used to say, you're amazing.